Luke has spoken twice in the past 24 hours. What the hell? We've got a director's cut, which yes, we like to read verbatim here, which I know a lot of people want a summary, but you'll be amazed how much you miss in these things. And plus, Luke kind of hints at future things inside of these director cuts. So Luke says, hey everyone, setting aside the tricks our memories play on us, things are often clearer in hindsight than when we're looking ahead. The recent past is clear, loaded with learnings from mistakes we make, and the future is fuzzy, hopeful, and unknown. As we ready last year's director's cut, we had made a number of changes to the game and wanted to give you all some insight as to why we made those changes. Each director's cut is a chance to acknowledge and own the learnings from the past when the wounds are fresh and give a glimpse at tomorrow. This edition is arriving a little earlier in the development process for how we're thinking about year 4 and beyond. And while some of the changes the game needs are clear to us, there are others we're still thinking about. Last summer's payload covered a wide range of topics that ended up touching on almost the whole game. Today's DC is going to look in depth at just a couple of topics. How our philosophy on seasons is evolving and the problems with weapons that last forever, with some additional quick hit topics at the end. This is exhaustive. We know there's more going on in the game than below, and there will be more to talk about later in the year. Before we look ahead, let's look back one more time. 2019 was about a few things for Bungie and Desitny. So first up, asserting our vision for Desitny. It's an action MMO in a single evolving world that you can play anytime, anywhere with your friends. It's a game we want to keep building on, and to do so with creative and work-life sustainability. Without our team's talents, there isn't a Desitny. And while that seems obvious to say, I think it's pretty easy to lose sight of amidst that this was awesome. This was not so awesome reactions to entertainment. As I covered at length last year, the way we built the annual pass wouldn't work for us over the long haul. We had a lot of help and a person power from our awesome and now former partners. We needed to find a better way forward while preserving the player experience and our business, because we are now self-publishing for Desitny. That was a big lift for Bungie in 2019. When I think about the total scope of that work and the sheer force of will the team demonstrated to deliver in 2019, I feel pretty good about what we achieved. Usually, this is where we list all of the positives, but instead, let's use the word count to improve on the past and look ahead to the future. As we begin 2020, much of the existential dread of will we make it out of this transition is gone. We've clarified our vision for Desitny and are working toward the future with that vision in mind. For me personally, the drive home each night isn't focused on will Bungie survive like before. Now it's where can Desitny go and how can we get there? I really like that right there, because we really don't know what the fears are that Bungie faces, right? But it had to have been a fear for them last year. Self-publishing, to even get those rights, they had to pay what, up to $100 million to buy those rights from Activision? And then on top of that, you gotta hope Desitny will survive and possibly thrive. So I can imagine that Luke Smith, as well as everybody at Bungie, was probably like face to face with that doubt last year. Now he continues, when I came back from the holiday this year, something about Desitny felt off to me. Season 9 is to me the best winter season we've done in Desitny 2, but something felt missing. And that missing element is what I think we need to focus on throughout 2020 and into 2021. So first up, aspiration, a hope or ambition of achieving something. Also the action or process of drawing breath. In Desitny 2, aspiration is what keeps our game alive. It is the air that fills its lungs. It is the breath that gives the game meaning. Aspiration can be about entering Desitny 2 for the first time and feeling the potential of what you could become. It can be about the pursuits in front of you. Or it can also be PvP players looking over the horizon and seeing the lighthouse and its treasures awaiting them if they pass the trials. Aspiration isn't something reserved for the elite or the engaged. It is for everyone. Although when I listen to players express the feeling that there's so much to do and none of it matters, I feel that pain. It's about the potential of a game to be more than something that just fills your time. It's about having goals and working towards something that matters to you. I'm not so naive as to think we can make something that matters to everyone. We all have different values, goals, and time. But I do think Desitny 2 can do a better job of enabling players to set short, medium, and long-term goals to work toward. As a player, aspiration is something I feel so strongly about. It's a difference between a game I fall in love with and a game I consume like junk food. Last year, we started thinking about aspiration and what is missing from Desitny. The gaping, burning, eye-shaped hole is something I felt since we set trials aside early in D2. Its return is part of a bigger goal for Desitny moving into 2020 and beyond. We need to refuel the aspiration in Desitny 2. And a bunch of what we're going to cover in this edition of Director's Cut is going to orbit this. All right, that is very true though. Aspiration is something that can make you fall in love with the game, and if done right, it isn't something reserved for the elite. It's the ability to peer over the edge, right? And see it. See what you could potentially become. Now moving on to Seasons of Change. With a few seasons under our belts in Shadowkeep, we're well underway on internal discussions around how we feel about them. We look at these iterations through a bunch of lenses. First, there's this soft, smushy, how do we feel about seasons? These feelings are mine from our own experiences and from ongoing roll-ups of information from our community. We also look at how well seasons are engaging our players. Are people coming back each week? How long are they playing? What do we look like month over month? And how does it perform against our historical data? Then we start to talk about where to take seasons in year 4. Looking back, there's some good stuff and things we need to work on. Let's start with what's been working well. Our seasonal narratives are starting to connect to one another. The transition to season 10, with the community getting involved by donating fractaline and 100 count stacks, accompanied by long buttonholds. Big shout out to the top 3 fractaline donors in the world: 3 Jules, Deighton, Warbucks, and Josh D29, and lighting the lighthouse with a neat start at player working to move the world forward, ensuring that each story link in the seasonal chain connects to the next and sets up where we're heading. The Save a Legend element of Season of Dawn was a nice deep cut with those who have been with Destiny since the beginning, and a way to introduce the ultimate Tynas Pigeon superfan / guardian ornithologist to many people who hadn't found his grave the first time. Seeing your reactions was a highlight, and the team had a lot of fun building this one. I'm enjoying the simplicity of leveling up Destiny's version of a battle pass. We want a progression that you could advance just by playing the game. We don't think we've got the whole XP thing figured out. Running in and out of lost sectors and flash farming XP isn't what we had in mind, but we can keep tuning it. Speaking strictly about my own play patterns, I feel the need each season to get all the past universal ornaments and the title. I like knowing these cosmetics are unique and won't be offered again. However, I find myself personally less motivated to try and get awesome rolls for new weapons, which is especially strange considering I like having a nice version of each gun in Destiny. Want to do some weapon stuff now? There's going to be more weapon stuff later on, but let's just chum the waters a little bit. Alright, begins the interlude. I still really like playing this game. I've acquired almost every weapon in the game. Why Anarchy? Dude, I actually have Anarchy. I'm good. Teraba, on the other hand. Come on, Bungie! I have some pretty slick rolls on a few of them, and near-miss internet-approved god rolls on others. Spare rations, rapid kill clip, and then full bore, and a quick visit to Disappoint Town with Alloy Magazine. Like many of you, I ended up gravitating to a few weapons and just using them instead of everything else. Sure, the Outlaw multi-kill clip breach light I farmed from Season of the Dawn is nice to have, and I love the art of the Dawn weapon set, but is it really going to displace my go-to PvE kinetic weapons? Probably not. I know that. I recently sat with a couple of external folks who really love Breakneck. It's the only thing they use. They aren't ever going to use another primary weapon in Destiny 2. Why? Because they don't need to. Part of aspiration is the pursuit that comes with it, and right now, the way we are and have been treating weapons in Destiny 2 isn't actually fueling the aspiration engine. Now back to seasons. End interlude. Alright, I see some major weapon changes on the horizon. Let's get through the seasonal stuff though. He continues. On the other hand, we aren't delivering the feeling of an evolving world. Instead, we are delivering the feeling of ephemeral private activities and rewards that go away. The Forsaken Annual Pass had its share of challenges. See last year's DC. But it also had this awesome property. If I stopped playing for a season, when I came back, there were a bunch of rewards and activities that I could catch up on. What we're discussing now, and which is early enough that things might still change, is how we focus our efforts around seasons from a development standpoint, while also trying to create the moments that make memories, while also balancing the amount of fear of missing out. This is a tricky balance because these elements don't connect neatly, and in many cases, they work against one another. The wall of text below is how we're thinking about things at the moment. We're going to be continuing to take in the feedback our guts and data provides. Your reactions and feedback are part of that data, so do continue to let us know your thoughts on our seasonal model. Before we get into some more thoughts and details, I want to be extremely clear. This year's version of seasons has too much FOMO in them. We want to fix this. Next year's season will have less. FOMO being anxiety, right? Is that what he means? I googled it. It says anxiety. Because we aren't spending our development resources and time as well as we could, we're talking about moving away from creating season bespoke private activities and instead using that time and effort to build themes that aren't just represented by a mark events that will fade away, but rather to inject these seasonal themes into more of the game. Like we continue to evolve the world's narrative, we can invest more in the evolving world of our public spaces and take further efforts to evolve Destiny 2's core activities. Core activities? What are those? news! Core activities are a way we think about a player's options and motivations in a given evening of Destiny. They are meant to be more evergreen. Quest campaign content, for instance, is not generally evergreen. It's usually something match-made and designed with replayability in mind, either from the properties of the activity itself or the rewards. For example, Crucible is fundamentally replayable because the opponents can be different and other players are the ultimate AI, where the Ordeal is fundamentally replayable because of its reward structure rather than random encounter generation. In fact, we hope the Ordeal is consistent within a given week to create mastery and efficiency in defeating it. I would argue and say that the best core activity currently right now in the game is actually Menagerie to me. It's match made. It has literally the best rewards in the game that you could farm for over and over again. And for the most part, it's fun, but I know where he's coming from. Ideally, core activities are convergent points for player motivations. For example, I want to maximize experience, chase awesome items, and generate economy that I can use to further my goals. Yes, I know no one talks this way. Right now, our seasonal activities like Sundial compete with other core activities. They have new rewards and award players powerful gear, but they don't provide a bunch of experience. Core activities provide a bunch of experience, but we all feel the pain of how many more seasons will I get the Titan rain-catching shoulder pads from the Drifter? What this competition means is that it can be really hard to line up a night of optimizing in Destiny because you're being pulled in different directions by our design. So what could investing more in core activities look like? It can mean more rewards being distributed into these activities, or it can mean taking a theme for a season and using it to galvanize strengths. If we're going to ask players to engage with these activities, we have an opportunity to leverage rewards throughout the season. Imagine the armor sets or sundial weapons being woven into core activity reward pools, or imagine experiences like pursuing roles for that sweet weapon that could only be found in given playlists as an end of a match reward, like a Crucible Ias Luna. Oh! Luke's talking dirty to us now. We also think we can invest more of our development time on our quest lines. Right now, things like Sundial consume team resources and then fade away. Imagine instead that the seasonal quest lines, like Save a Legend, didn't go away in the following season, but instead existed until the next expansion releases. That way, as a player drifts in and out of the game, there's a bunch of content building up for them to play when they return. Just as we continue to evolve the narrative of our world, we can continue to invest in evolving the world of open world public spaces. In case you're unfamiliar, these are the spaces where you seamlessly see other players appear. We've built a world where players can encounter others, but we haven't made a world with fights challenging enough where you feel like others matter. Whoa, that's strong. That's some MMO lingo, aka super public events on the horizon. No, but on a real note, guys, he's right. Something that Forsaken had. Whether you started playing Forsaken day one or you waited 3-4 months, it really didn't matter. All of the content was still there when you came back. Gambit Prime didn't go away. Black Armory is still present to this day. Fantastic content that allow players to jump in and out because everybody's got a different schedule. Everyone has different time. And I would say the biggest thing that's missing from the current seasonal structure is that everyone has a level of that anxiety because they feel like they got to get everything done within that season. Yes, it's nice to go after that title or to get those god rolls, but having that weight of, oh, you got to get it done now before the next 3 months is up with is stressful, which is like the opposite of why we game. So if they're actually going to be restructuring this to allow for players to dip into this throughout the year, and I think an entire year between the major expansions in the fall is plenty of time for people to get up in there and do everything that they possibly need to do. Now moving on to weapons forever, the problem. Okay, let's talk more about weapons, and let's begin with how weapons have worked in Destiny 2. All the way back to Destiny 2 Vanilla, every weapon you get is a weapon you can keep and infuse to raise its power level indefinitely. Remember the waters I talked about chumming earlier? It's time to eat. In Destiny 2, with Infusion, it's like having every card you own in Magic available and playable in all formats forever. It passively creates power creep, an ongoing Destiny problem, which also means our team needs to spend more and more of their time retesting and supporting old stuff instead of making new stuff. It reduces player desire for new items, which dismantles aspiration, like the Shard the Blue post-Crucible match ritual. And it means we ultimately create a ton of gear that doesn't have any value beyond ticking the box on the I got it checklist. That isn't value. It's actually the opposite of value because it's work that we could be putting into making new stuff or improving old stuff. Our combat team works extremely hard to make weapons feel unique. Each legendary and mini blues get their own flavors of special sauce. Sometimes it's the way a gun sounds. Sometimes it's the insanely over budget range stat hand in hand. Sometimes it's the recoil pattern. Sometimes it's the art. Sometimes it's something indescribable that just makes an item resonate with our players. In an action game like Desitny, our weapons are field-based extensions to the character. I've played MMOs and ARPGs where I get amazing weapons, but rarely have those weapons felt like an extension of my avatar. Certainly in an action game like Dark Souls or Sekiro, the weapons become a field-based extension of my character rather than a stat stick like Fang of Coriol Straz. I don't even know what that is. What is that? Let's Google it. Oh, it's something from World of Warcraft. Damn it! Dude, I didn't play enough WoW. I wish I can relate. Played a hell of a lot of Dark Souls though, so I know where he's coming from there. Remember many words ago in previous DCs when I talked about the collision between the action game and RPG? Couple with that, with our theme of aspiration, and I believe we are approaching an inflection point for weapons and infusion in Desitny 2. Fellas, I'm getting scared. We've made a lot of magic cards, and we want you to keep the ones you love in your collection, as opposed to taking them and throwing them all away and having the tower get destroyed again. And a bunch of those magic cards could be playable around the world while free roaming or in PvP formats. But where power matters or aspirational activities are involved, we're going to make some changes to legendary weapons. There's a lot of learning to do when Desitny launched in 2014, but there was also some real good stuff in that game. I think back on a bunch of it fondly, almost wistfully at times. The weapons from the Vaulted Glass could be powerful, unique, and rare. If you had a Fatebringer, you probably had a bunch of Ascendant Shards to commemorate all the times you didn't get it. I miss those days when rewards were rare and so special that you celebrated or hated when your friends got one. That's in part because the design of the game gave them space to be different, space to be awesome. It's hard to cleave out the space in the current version of Desitny 2. Weapons that are supposed to come from Pinnacle activities, like raids or trials, don't really have a space to breathe. The answer can't be, just make them better, because that approach ends up with the reckoning situation I described last year. Now, we had Pinnacle Weapons, which were largely just talents that had an exotic-esque capabilities in legendary clothing. These weapons were typically the result of long pursuits, and when they arrived in your hands, they were pretty strong. Sometimes hilariously strong. Looking at you, Recluse. It also meant the team spent significant time developing each one. If you imagine the abstract weapon space as a pyramid, those Pinnacle weapons largely sat at the top of the pyramid. Most other legendary weapons are down in the clump of, they aren't really that different. Why? Because when every legendary item the team builds is going to be around forever, outliers get weeded out. Back to 2014. The Vaulted Glass weapons could be memorable because we knew they weren't going to be in the ecosystem for things like trials, nightfalls, and raids forever. They naturally fall by the wayside because power, attack, light in those days would make them obsolete. In the world we're imagining, we'll have a space at the top end to create powerful legendary weapons. Legendaries that are just better than other items in the classification. We'll be able to do that because the design space for weapons will expand and contract over time. Items will enter the ecosystem, be able to be infused for some number of seasons, and beyond that, the power won't be able to be raised. Our hope is that instead of having to account for a weapon's viability forever when we create one, it can be easier to let something powerful exist in the ecosystem. And those potent weapons entering the ecosystem means there's more fun items to pursue. Fellas, we're going to break this down in just a moment, but this is huge. Changes like this also means legendary weapons or their talents that would be shelved could be reissued at a future date or could be brought back in a fun way by involving our community. The more specific nitty-gritty for this will come at a little bit further down the road, but we wanted to get some thinking behind it to use sooner rather than later. Simplest version of how it's going to work is that legendary weapons will have a fixed value for how high they can be infused. Those values will project the weapon's viable in-game lifespan, and we think that that lifespan is somewhere between 9 and 15 months. One final note, we are not applying this to exotic weapons at this time. We want to iterate on the legendary ecosystem first. Alright, let's just break that down. First up, back inside of Desitny 1, every year, just like we even have now, there will be a power jump, right? In the big annual expansion, we actually do it season by season now, but back then, when that big annual expansion would come, power would leap for everything in the game, but our old legendary weapons would not be able to be infused past the previous power cap or light cap. This meant for the most part, for in-game activities, they were not viable options anymore. Normally, we just deleted them. Most of us just put it in our vault though, and cried until they finally returned to us at a later date. Now, this is a double-sided sword. On one side, it's amazing because the weapon having that finite window that is extremely viable means that it can be super powerful. He brought up Fatebringer, which is a perfect example of that. Fatebringer, by the way, for my new players, was a hand cannon back inside of Destiny 1 that you can receive from Vault of Glass. Super dope. One of the best PvE weapons ever created. It had a perk called Firefly, which is essentially like Dragonfly, but it was also combined with arc damage, which had like this shimmering arc effect whenever you landed those precision kills, aka resulted in a hell of a lot of Thrall dying in one shot. Now, the other side of the sword is that there is a finite window in which that weapon is truly viable. And no matter how beautiful or how deadly that weapon may be, if it is capped in power, that's pretty much it. Now, this actually results in a couple of things happening. Number one, it can actually result in us clearing out our vaults a little more. But if you're like me, you're probably keeping everything just in case, considering that most of the weapons kind of go in and out of being like meta at some point. No one ever thought we were going to be in a sidearm meta. We're not necessarily there, but sidearms are way better this season, and they'll be just as good next season. So all those sidearms that you kept season after season finally became good in Season of Dawn. And for my crazy people that kept auto rifles, there's a lot of people out there that was just loading up auto rifles into their vault, knowing at some point auto rifles will be meta. A lot of people called you crazy, but you believed. And hot damn, we're getting an auto rifle buff next season, and auto rifles are going to be nasty. Now, this change will result in your players that like to just truly optimize their setup at all times to clear out their vaults. Simultaneously, though, this will actually alleviate a lot of stress on the Sandbox team at Bungie. That weapon comes out, and it's super, super powerful. Bungie's probably going to be like, oh, well, it's deadly, but it's only going to be deadly like this for the next 6-7 months or whenever that season or weapon drops. So I understand it. It also gives more viability to new weapons in the future. I also like that they're actually applying this to legendary weapons and not exotics. They used to do it to both back in the day, which I thought really, really sucked. Let me know in the comments below, though, what you think of these weapon changes. Now, moving on. Cosmic Gardeners. Last year, we said we want playing Destiny to feel like you're playing in a game world with true momentum, a universe that is going somewhere, a game where things are happening, not just in terms of new items and activities, but in terms of narrative. It's frequently seemed like Destiny was treading waters in terms of moving the world's narrative forward. We want to tackle this in Destiny 2's third year. That statement is still true for us today. As we look into Destiny 2 Year 4 and beyond, we started this in Year 3, but the job isn't done. By its very nature, this is something that really doesn't have an end. The idea of building a narrative that is moving the story of your Guardians, plural, all of you, forward, creating a universe where permanent change is possible and where players can have meaningful impact is still a thing we're chasing and experimenting with. To get there, change is going to be inevitable. See above, where I talked about how thinking about adjusting the seasonal model. We said before that Destiny 2 cannot keep growing indefinitely. There are lots of reasons why this is true, some technical and some creative, because the story wants to push into new areas. On the technical side, I come back to sustainability. As new areas, features, and event types are added to Destiny, the problem of maintenance grow accordingly for the team. New changes to the system have to be checked against all content, new and old alike. That introduces risks and a big burden on our team to maintain that legacy content. In practical terms, it also prevents us from responding to players who have problems as quickly as we would like. Seasons could do some of the heavy lifting here, in the sense of giving players a sense of shared purpose and understanding of what they're working for. But when we ready expansions, it's a chance to make some more fundamental changes to the game world and its system. We've done significant system changes to all of Destiny games every time we've shipped an expansion, and now we're going to make more changes to the game as we go forward. We're getting towards the end here, but before we wrap, here's a few quick hits on some important topics. First up, shortcut number 1, faction rallies. Lots of folks have been wondering if faction rallies will return. We have no plans to bring back faction rallies. The reward gear hasn't been used that much, our character cast is growing too large, and crucially, they didn't drive a bunch of engagement with the game. That said, there's some sweet looks in that gear, and removing the faction rally armor to the legendary Ingram reward pools in Season 10, alongside a few popular faction weapons. Alright, well, that's very upfront. I appreciate that. Kind of sad, because I did like faction rallies, but there probably wasn't a lot of player engagement. I mean, a lot of people just kind of like jumped on, chose whatever faction, did whatever little things they had to do just to get the weapons, and then jump right off. I think the entire design around faction rallies just didn't really work here for Destiny 2. On top of that, I don't even know if the narrative really made sense. Like, I know we have factions permanently inside of Destiny 1, and they would say some things like in their dialogue, but in terms of Destiny 2, I don't know. There just wasn't a lot of expansion there. And what are we gonna have? Like a whole season based on faction rallies? We could! Hey, looky there, man. I wouldn't mind some tower drama. Shortcut number 2, Bright Ingrams. For Season 10, we're doing away with Bright Ingrams as purchasable items. We want players to know what something costs before they buy it. Bright Ingrams don't live up to that principle, so we will no longer be selling them on the Eververse store, though they will still appear on the free track of the Season Pass. That's huge. Yeah, you really don't know what you're getting, right? It's just all based on RNG. Bungie moving away from that model. Excellent on them. Shortcut number 3, New Light, New Intro. Our goals for New Light last year were about bringing new players into the universe and getting them to core activities as quickly as we could. We dramatically underestimated how many new Guardians would wake up on the Cosmodrome. We're going to improve the New Light entry this fall and flesh the starting experience in Destiny out. So they're actually probably going to change this completely, give it a new mission, something to kind of bring New Light players up to speed better. And yes, we've seen some glimpses at the numbers. It's amazing how many New Light players have joined us, which is why I know I kind of like go back and explain things that most of our veteran players already know. But there is a crap load of New Light players that when we bring up things like Fatebringer, have no idea what the hell we're talking about. Now moving on, shortcut number 4, quest log. There's another round of changes coming out with Season 10 for the quest tab. The number of quests you have at any given time sure can feel daunting, especially for procrastinators. So we're adding a new feature to the quest tab, categorization. All quests are automatically assigned a category, and this buckets them into a specific area within the quest tab. For example, exotic quests get their own category as well as seasonal quests. The seasonal quest category is helpful in that it contains all of the quests that expire at the end of the season. There are several categories, including one for older releases. For example, Forsaken quests. This should help players focus on the quests that are new and most relevant versus the older content that maybe isn't as high priority as it used to be. That's actually really nice. I wonder if there was a way they can actually put an icon on it though for like New Light players that know whether or not that's a high priority content quest versus older content. Because some of the questions that my friends had when they first started playing Destiny was like, hey, should I do all this Forsaken stuff before I do the new seasonal stuff? Either way it goes, this categorization, excellent. It needs to happen. Now finally, the exit music. Thanks for being here. I appreciate that you're invested in the game enough or excited enough about trolling to sift through the text above. We're early into 2020 and we've got some cool stuff planned. Shortly, Season 10 is entering orbit and there will be more to talk about as the calendar continues. A lot of work from a lot of folks goes into each time I or anyone else from the dev team talks about how we're thinking about the game. Many thanks to them and many thanks to you for being a part of this community. See you soon, Luke Smith. All right, guys, that's the entire breakdown. I know it's a long one. Big shout out to Luke here for giving us some insight. We like to read it like this though, because we hear the words from him directly on what's to come in the future. Big breakdowns all around the board. Legendary weapons having the power capped after a year. Faction rallies not returning. New intro for New Light players. Quest logs, as well as layout changes for future seasons. We got some big changes on the horizon, guys. Feel free to let me know in the comments below what you think. And fellas and ladies, thank you for watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.